Hello and welcome to my channel. This is not going to be a political news opinion video, as this is the middle of May, but I am instead going to be taking a political quiz in order for you guys to know what my position is on many issues. So let's just get right into it. So the first question is, should the government increase spending on public transportation? Absolutely. The government should spend more on public transit. Of course, as long as they move towards environmentally friendly options, as 2030 is now the deadline for climate change. The reason that public transportation is so important is for those who are either too poor to afford a vehicle of their own, or the homeless to be able to get around otherwise. As a lot of people here in Oak Hill, for instance, don't feel that we need any kind of support for the homeless in our city, because there are some in Beckley, but a 20 to 30 minute drive is a lot longer on foot, which is what most homeless people would have to do, though there are limited amounts of transportation available here in the Oak Hill Beckley area as well. The next question, should government increase environmental regulations to prevent climate change? Yes, as I said, 2030 is the new cutoff, and so we really cannot be wasting time. We have a decade, and that's it. So, if you want to see any generation after my little brothers, which is a generation after mine, admittedly, survive on this planet, then you're going to want environmental regulations. So let's see here. We do need to provide more incentives for alternative energy, so my answer is yes, and provide more incentives for alternative energy. Should the United States withdraw from the Paris Climate Agreement? No, we should not. And everything that people say is bad about the Paris Climate Agreement is simply false. The Paris Climate Agreement wants us to reduce our carbon footprint by a percentage, but it does not tell us how to do so. We get to choose how we want to reduce that carbon footprint. So all the opposition you've heard to it is simply false. So we should not withdraw from the Paris Climate Agreement. Should disposable products such as plastic cups, plates, and cutlery that contain less than 50% of biodegradable material be banned? I do not think it's feasible to do something like that, but at the same time, I understand that we need to make policies very similar to this. So, I think that out of the options given on this quiz, the one I agree with most is no, increase consumer incentives to recycle these products instead. Okay, more environmental questions. Do I support hydraulic fracking to extract oil and natural gas resources? The answer is no. Simply because, well, there's a lot of reasons. We need to be transitioning away from oil and natural gas. But in addition to that, fracking, despite what a lot of people say, or what very biased studies say, I should say, Okay. Fracking is not safer, and despite what the companies will say, can lead to significant environmental damages. It is not safer. So my answer to this one is no, and we should pursue more sustainable energy resources instead. Should the government stop construction of the Dakota Access Pipeline? So, this is a very difficult choice for me because I do not like I should say this has been a difficult choice for me in the past. As I understand, like, obviously it should not be going where it is because it just simply needs to be rerouted even if you do support the pipeline. However, there are so many more, I need better grammar. There is so much more wrong with the Dakota Access Pipeline. So I do not want construction to continue on that pipeline, especially since we need to be transitioning to green energy within the next 10 years, probably, but even before that is needed. So, the construction should be stopped and the government should not be allowed to acquire land by eminent domain is my choice here. I do believe that eminent domain is alright, so long as it does not go to a company such as it is with this pipeline. If they were to say use eminent domain to create a park, I'd be okay with that though. Should the U.S. expand offshore oil drilling? No, we should not. I believe that, well, for one, offshore oil drilling is by far the most dangerous way to get oil for the environment, as even though we have many regulations about how to shut down these oil platforms, they are almost never followed, therefore leading to oil to just leak into the ocean after people have left, not to mention all the other things I have mentioned bad about fossil fuels already. We need to not expand offshore oil drilling, and here's the thing. I understand what the attacks on this position are going to be, but I don't care. We need to nationalize the energy sector in order to transition to green energy in a more efficient way, being able to provide all fossil fuel workers with the proper training into the green energy. And the only way that's possible is to nationalize oil, gas, and coal. So, yes, that means a government-run fossil fuel company, which could be very, very effective in the transition. And as most government-run businesses are actually more efficient than privately run businesses, contrary to what most people believe. By no means do I believe that all industry should be nationalized. After all, I am a business management major. I want to be an entrepreneur someday. But when it comes to things like this, where the fossil fuel industries are literally killing people, we need to do something about it. The next question is also an environmental question. Should the government give tax credits and subsidies to the wind power industry? I believe that wind is one of the greener energies Overall, I really do not like the idea of tax credits and subsidies to companies, but we do need as many ways to transition to greener energies as possible. Wind energy is something that can also harm birds and things like that, but it is far better to interfere slightly with the birds' flight patterns, possibly even killing some birds with a wind farm, than it is to be adding to a worldwide destruction with oil, coal, or natural gas. Not to mention, over time, birds will adapt to fly around the windmill. It's simply how it's going to work. There's no way that birds are just going to keep flying into the windmill. So over time, the number of birds that get killed by windmills will be reduced, though obviously there will never reach zero. With things like that, you can never reach 0 deaths. In literally anything, it's almost impossible to reach 0 deaths. But that does not mean you don't try. So there should also be ways to block the birds, obviously, but we're focusing on wind power right now. So, yes, the government should support more sustainable energy technologies. Should researchers be allowed to use animals in testing the safety of drugs, vaccines, medical devices, and cosmetics? I really do not like that animals are tested by researchers. However, we cannot go directly to humans either, as either way, you're going to have a loss of life on the first try. And while I view all lives as created equal, I summarize my religious beliefs as love all life, in fact. But I cannot say that I would disallow animal testing. I would try my best to ensure that the animals are as humanely treated as is possible. But it's a really, really difficult decision on this question. So, researchers should be allowed to, but with significant oversight. Should cities be allowed to offer private companies economic incentives to relocate? Absolutely not. It is ridiculous how, Amazon was able to have of so many cities offer them so many crazy economic incentives. There was one city that offered to give them 100% of the money from a certain tax, effectively meaning that Amazon was taxing the city. Are you kidding me? That is ridiculous. That is not how this should work. Like I said previously, I am a business person, but I believe in the separation of business and state just as much as I believe in the separation of religion and state. All three of those should be as separate as could be possible. So, yeah. So, should they? Absolutely not. No. Let's see. No, companies should not cities should not be allowed to offer them that, and companies should be punished for moving jobs out of the country. I do not like the wording of that. What I propose is a tax on any assets that a company moves out of country. If, say, Amazon were to move $1 million from the United States into, we'll say Switzerland, because it's a country, then Amazon would have to pay $250,000, for example, in taxes, simply for moving that $1 million out of the country. That is what I mean by that. So if a company were to, say Amazon were to move their full, whatever, $1 trillion company out, then they would have to pay the United States government $250 billion to do so. I believe that that would bring in some money and ensure that American businesses stay in America, because no one wants to pay that much. Should the president be able to authorize military force against terrorists without congressional approval? The reason I said terrorists weird is because this quiz is a bit outdated because it says Al-Qaeda instead of terrorists, but same thing. That's why the question is still on here, because it does update. So against terrorists without congressional approval. I believe that if we are going to go to war against terrorists, we do need congressional approval, as that is in the Constitution. So Congress needs to approve military force. Now, there are procedures. Formal procedures say that the president can take military action so long as within a certain time period he notifies and receives permission from Congress to continue the military force. However, this procedure has not been followed for decades, despite that being unconstitutional. So we need to change that. Should the U.S. assassinate suspected terrorists in foreign countries? No, because of one word in that sentence. Suspected. There is no... If you just suspect someone's a terrorist, that doesn't mean that they are. So we cannot kill someone just because we think they're a terrorist. We need to make sure, and the only way to make sure is to capture them and give them a trial / interrogate them, etc. That is the only way we can be 100% sure that they actually are a terrorist. You cannot just kill someone who may or may not be a terrorist. People can be put on the no-fly list in the United States, aka be suspected of being a terrorist, for very minor things. So we should not be killing people in foreign countries based on a belief that we do not have properly confirmed. Should the United States build a wall on the southern border? No. That's it. Just no. Well, since there are multiple no's on this, I'll go ahead and elaborate a bit further, I suppose. No, this would be too costly and ineffective because a majority of illegal immigrants come from Europe, and a majority of them come by airplane and simply overstay a visa in order to illegally immigrate. Not walk over the border in the middle of the desert where they could die. Doesn't that make a little bit of logical sense? Should illegal immigrants have access to government-subsidized health care? As a supporter of Medicare for All, it may come as a shock to other progressives that I do not believe so. I do believe that anyone who is lawfully residing within the United States should have access to health care. Now, I do believe that illegal immigrants should be able to have health insurance. So for all those people who do not support Medicare for All, guess what? The health insurance agencies will continue to exist for illegal immigrants. Hope you're happy. So let's see here. No, but they should be allowed to purchase private health care. There we go. Now, that insurance will be highly regulated, of course, because they still deserve quality health care. Every human does. However, I do believe you should come here legally if you want to have paid for health care, as it is our tax money, and there is such thing as healthcare tourism, which is taking advantage of the taxpayers, in my view. I understand that other progressives do not hold that view, but that is my view. Should illegal immigrants be offered in-state tuition rates at public colleges within their residing state? My answer is no. They should be paying out of state because they are not legally living within that state. I support immigration. I support people coming to the United States for a better life. I simply believe it should be legal. And I do not believe that we should treat illegal immigrants unfairly. I simply believe that they should be treated as what they are, which, legally speaking, they are not a resident of that state, meaning that, legally speaking, they are an out-of-state student. Simple enough. Should children of illegal immigrants be granted citizenship? Yes. Anyone born in the United States is, legally speaking, a citizen of the United States. And of course, they can also go through the citizenship process in order to get citizenship as well. Both of those should be viable options to them. Should local law enforcement be allowed to detain illegal immigrants for minor offenses and transfer them to federal immigration authorities? No, they should not. Right. Really, only violent immigrants should ever be deported. And even then, only violent illegal immigrants. No violent legal immigrant should be deported, regardless of what they did. I don't care if they killed 1,000 people. They are still legally within this country, therefore they stay in this country to serve life in prison. Should sanctuary cities receive federal funding? Yes. All you are doing is hurting your own people by not giving federal funding to sanctuary cities. A majority of people in sanctuary cities are still American citizens. And even if the majority were illegal immigrants or whatever else you want to say, yeah, they are people and they are a city in our country. So yes, they should receive federal funding. Should Muslim immigrants be banned from entering the country until the government improves its ability to screen out potential terrorists? No, that is highly bigoted to say that Muslim immigrants be banned. And I never understood why it was Muslim immigrants either. Like, after we told you Muslim immigrants was bigoted against an religion, how about this? Even though I would not be in favor of this either, Arab. Which is now racist, but at least you're not doing just a religion from a country which is a lot more obviously bigoted. Like, you're not even trying to hide that it's bigoted if you're just going after a religion. If you're going after Arab, at least you're going after the entire country. Like, come on. If you're going to be bigoted, at least be bigoted in a way that makes sense. Now, like I said, both are bigoted and neither should be supported. So, Muslims should not be banned, and we should not ban from quote-unquote high-risk countries either, because both are bigoted. So, no, banning immigrants based on their religion is unconstitutional. That as well. Should working illegal immigrants be given temporary amnesty? Yep. And we need to create a simple path to citizenship. A lot of illegal immigrants come here illegally simply because of how difficult the process is and how long the waits are and how expensive it is. And then all the people saying don't immigrate illegally then look at all the legal ways to immigrate and say, no, that's a dumb way, no, that's a dumb way, no, that's a dumb way, no, that shouldn't be allowed. Literally all ways to immigrate to the United States have been attacked by President Trump and his supporters. Literally all of them. All of them. All of the ways to get into this country legally have been attacked. All the ways to get into this country illegally have been attacked. So, according to President Trump and all his supporters that also have attacked all forms of immigration that he has, are saying that they do not support any of the current ways to become a citizen or an immigrant into this country. Should the United States increase or decrease the amount of temporary work visas given to highly skilled immigrant workers? We should increase them, because here's the thing. Everyone thinks that giving these away means that there are less jobs for Americans, but studies show that people from foreign countries are a lot more likely to create jobs here in the United States, so that is simply inaccurate. So we must increase the number of highly skilled immigrant workers coming to the United States. Should immigrants be required to learn English? They should not be required to learn English, though obviously it would be easier for them to learn it otherwise. We should embrace the diversity, though. It would be easier in this country if they speak English for them, for their sake, but that does not matter. If they do not want to speak English, that is their choice. Language is not culture, in my opinion. There is so much more that we can have as culture. Should immigrants be deported if they commit a serious crime? No, only if they entered the country illegally. Should the United States increase restrictions on its current border security policy? No, we should not. We need to increase temporary work visas. Should immigrants to the United States be allowed to hold dual citizenship status? Yes, because a majority of countries in the world allow dual citizenship with the United States. So, why would we do that when that would then take away the rights of Americans living in other countries? That's simply stupid. So, should immigrants? Yes, they should. So, yes. So, simple answer there is yes, they should be allowed to have dual citizenship. Should immigrants be required to pass a citizenship test to demonstrate a basic understanding of our country's language, history, and government? If they wish to become a citizen, I believe that it should cover the most basic, simple topics, because I realize that I am an outlier when it comes to being able to pass the citizenship test as a born citizen. Should there be a temporary ban on all immigration into the United States? No. Every time a country has ever isolated itself from the rest of the world, they have fallen behind technologically and has later been the target of war, with no one coming to their aid because they have no allies. So we should not ban immigration, as that will simply lead to a further distancing from all of our allies. We should increase the amount of immigrants because, like I said, immigrants actually improve our economy if you actually look at the data. And improve our economy, improve the number of jobs, usually even increase salaries, etc., etc. Should there be more restrictions on the current process of purchasing a gun? Well regulated is literally in the Second Amendment. So, we should require strict background checks, psychological testing, and training. As I mentioned before, we will never get gun violence deaths down to 0. But I am willing to make purchasing a gun harder to do for 300 million Americans to save one life. Because one life is worth frustration. If you are not willing to go through frustration, waits, etc., to save a human life, I do not understand how you could sleep at night. I don't understand that. So, simply put, if you are not pro-gun control, you are pro-gun violence. I know that's controversial to say. I know that's tough to hear. I know it sounds crazy. But it's true. If you do not support gun control, you're supporting that one more death. You're supporting that one more gunshot wound. You're supporting that. Even if you're not meaning to. I'm not saying you're a bad person. I'm saying you're supporting the wrong cause. The NRA has lied about how things are, how gun control works. They act as if every single gun control measure is going to take guns away from you, when it's not. There are very, very few politicians that legitimately are going to require you to give away your guns. And those people will never be elected to the presidency, and their policies will never become national law. And even if they did, they would be struck down immediately by the Supreme Court as unconstitutional. Like, if gun control is good and keeping your guns is perfectly fine. There is a balance to be had. Okay? Okay. Should teachers be allowed to carry guns in schools? No. Hire security guards. My school had security guards and a police officer on duty at pretty much the entire school day, and would occasionally have every single student go through a metal detector that on random days. You would not know which day. And I believe that was effective in keeping us safe, and it would be perfectly fine to implement that at perhaps a little more scaled up, as my school was smaller. So I believe that would be effective, so long as they understand, if you're a security guard, you're a policeman, it's your responsibility to confront the gunman, or knifeman, or macheteman, or who cares what they have, the weapon person. Should victims of gun violence be able to sue firearms dealers and manufacturers? I have never understood, why would you be able to do that? Unless the gun manufacturer or dealer was knowingly negligent, why would you ever be allowed to sue them because someone used their product to kill you? Or, not kill you, obviously, but harm you. Would you sue the kitchen knife company if someone, stabbed you with a kitchen knife? What? I don't get that. Someone stabs you with a knife, you look at the knife and it says KitchenAid on it. You're going to sue KitchenAid? What? What? That doesn't make sense to me. No, not unless they knew that they were going to use that knife or that gun to hit you or harm you. It doesn't make sense. In favor of decriminalizing drug use. Yes, for most, but not all drugs. Simply put, prohibition, just like on alcohol, is less safe than regulation. Do you support affirmative action policies? For starters, affirmative action is nothing like what you think it is. If they had a percentage that had to be black and a percentage that had to be Hispanic, they would be violating Supreme Court decisions regarding affirmative action. Therefore, that is not what affirmative action is. So, yes, I support affirmative action, but that is not what that means. Got it? Okay, cool. Do you support the Patriot Act? No. And pass strict laws prohibiting government surveillance without probable cause and a warrant. Should it be illegal to burn the American flag? No, I don't think anyone should, but they have the right to do so. Should the Supreme Court be reformed to include more seats and term limits for judges? So, a lot of people are saying this because of how politicized the Supreme Court is, with Republicans appointing conservative justices, Democrats supporting liberals, etc., etc. Meaning that you never truly have an unbiased court. I believe one of these answers I need to address, which is no, reforming the Supreme Court is unconstitutional and would upset the balance of power. That is inaccurate. Simply put, having the number of justices on the Supreme Court is not in the Constitution. In fact, for a very long time, there were only 5 justices on the Supreme Court. For a very long time, every time a new circuit court, a federal circuit court was added, a new Supreme Court justice would be added. So, we did that up until we got 9 justices. And then we have just stuck to 9 since then. So, theoretically, adding or subtracting seats can be done without a constitutional amendment. Just so you understand that. Now, term limits is something that would probably require a constitutional amendment or a clever workaround on whatever that may be. I do believe that something needs to be done for the Supreme Court, though the precise thing, I do not think that more seats is a good choice, because you would have to keep it odd, meaning that if you were going to increase it, well, I believe it should stay odd simply so we always have a decision instead of having it even and just 50-50. Like that, you never want a Supreme Court case to be 50-50. So if we were to increase the number of seats, which I don't think we should do, we should go to 11, 13, or 15, which all sound like way too many justices to me. 11 is maybe viable, but still. As for term limits, if we go through a constitutional amendment to do a term limit, I think that could be effective, but at the same time, we would have to, by the way, term limit simply means, in this case, creating a term. I do not support, like, term limits as in, the president can only serve 2 terms. That's ridiculous to me. But what term limits for these justices mean is, like, instead of serving for life, they serve for 12 years or whatever. I think that would be the more effective one, though I think there are other better options that have to be out there. Should people in the no-fly list be banned from purchasing guns and ammunition? Yes. Yes, but we need to improve the no-fly list, as even minor things can get you on that list. Should the government be allowed to seize private property with reasonable compensation for public or civic use, which is eminent domain, mentioned earlier? Yes, but only for public projects, never private projects. Should the United States government grant immunity to Ed Snowden? Yes, and investigate the CIA and NSA directors instead. He is a hero. If you disagree, you are stupid. You are making a stupid decision. You are not stupid. Most people are not. Sorry, not what I meant. Should social media companies ban political advertising? No, they should not. They should be better at regulating it. The fact that people are now not able to spread their message using one of the most effective means that there is really disappointing. Should the military upgrade Air Force One? I think it is okay to upgrade the presidential plane. I don't get why $4 billion for one plane. Unless you're, like, completely redoing it. Which, why would you do that? Should internet service providers be allowed to speed up access to popular websites at the expense of slowing down access to less popular websites? No, we need net neutrality. Equally and continue the openness of the internet. Should police increase surveillance and patrol of Muslim neighborhoods? No, targeting Muslims is unconstitutional, bigoted, and incendiary. Since we're on this one, well, actually not since we're on this one, what I meant is, since this is a good stopping point for me to interject this, anything that I have said that is controversial or otherwise sounding mean-spirited, simply understand that I am trying to express that I think it is a common sense position, and that I have trouble understanding why someone would believe a different position. I should not be saying such rude things. As my responses to them, they are my natural reaction. I should not be doing that. I should be thinking it through. So I do apologize for that. Should the NSA be allowed to collect basic metadata of citizens' phone calls, such as numbers, timestamps, and call durations? No, and abolish the NSA. Should the government regulate social media sites as a means to prevent fake news and misinformation? No, the government should not determine what is fake or real news. Should there be term limits on members of Congress? No, we already have term limits that are called elections. And, for me to add to that, we need to make a constitutional amendment saying that it is illegal to have a term limit on any office. Because it is so undemocratic to say that the people cannot elect a popular politician again. Not to mention that even though term limits are aimed at decreasing corruption, studies have shown that they actually increase corruption. So, we just need to keep elections and need to better educate the voters. Should the redrawing of congressional districts be controlled by an independent, nonpartisan commission? Let's see here. Well, I'm going to go with yes on this one, but I actually support using a auto-generated computer algorithm so as to ensure there's literally no one person involved in the decision. And there have been computer algorithms created to do such a thing under all the requirements needed. Should the government pass laws to protect whistleblowers? We should protect whistleblowers, regardless of what they reveal. Should the government raise the retirement age for Social Security? No. Simply put, no. We need to eliminate the income cap on taxable earnings and stop spending the current funds on other programs. You see, this is why Social Security is insolvent. A person who is in power will make a decision that will reduce funds for Social Security And then a few months later, they'll say, look, Social Security doesn't have enough money. We have to raise the retirement age. And then they cut funding. And then they say we have to raise the retirement age. Then they cut funding. Then they say we have to raise the retirement age. The only reason we have to raise the retirement age is because they keep cutting it. They keep cutting all the spending that they were supposed to be doing. Otherwise, and then once someone says, hey, let's add this spending back into Social Security, they say, no, we're already spending too much on it. And it's just like, you literally just cut this a few months ago. Like, it's not... They know how to play politics, I'll give them that. Should the government continue to fund Planned Parenthood? Yes. Not only do they perform abortions, they perform so many other essential services. So, even if you don't support abortion, yes, fund Planned Parenthood, damn it. What is your stance on abortion? I am pro-choice, but ban after the first 3 months. The reason for this position is, contrary to popular belief, there is a scientific definition for what constitutes life. And the point in which a fetus becomes a baby is most likely soon after the first trimester. And if you look it up, there has never been a premature baby that has even been born alive in the first trimester. For pretty obvious reasons. They do not meet the requirements to even be considered life. Meaning they cannot be born alive because they were not alive in the womb yet. That is the scientific definition. Simply put. Should health insurance providers be required to offer free birth control? Yes, except for religious organizations and charities that oppose the use of contraception, except for only those that are religious organizations, in my case, because there makes no sense for a charity to oppose it. Because, like I said, religion and business, which charities are technically a business, by the way, need to be separate. Just as much as religion and state are separate. Just as much as business and state are separate. Should gender identity be added to anti-discrimination laws? Yes, and the government should do more to protect minorities from discrimination. Should a business be able to deny service to a customer if the request conflicts with the owner's religious beliefs? No. Your rights end where another person's rights are violated. So, the answer is no. All customers deserve to be treated equally. I believe in freedom of religion, but I also understand that your freedom ends where another person's freedom would be blocked or prohibited by yours. Should gay couples have the same adoption rights as straight couples? Yes. In fact, there is scientific evidence to suggest that the entire reason that the gay man and lesbian woman exists, evolutionarily speaking, is to be the gay uncle or lesbian aunt, as they are more common in larger families, allowing the gay uncle or lesbian aunt to care for the children, allowing the children to be more likely to live to adulthood as they have more adults looking after them. That is the evolutionary reason why gay people exist. The evolutionary reason that gay people exist is to care for children. Therefore, gay couples should be able to adopt. Do I support the legalization of same-sex marriage? Absolutely. I will allow churches the right to refuse to do same-sex ceremonies, though, because you do have freedom of religion. I'm fine with that. But suggest somewhere else they can get married. Suggest somewhere else. It is not okay to just turn someone away. If you turn someone away, then yeah, you're going to be violating the law if I had written the law. If you're going to turn someone away because of their sexuality, you must then provide them with a suggestion for someone who will. I think that's simple enough. I think that's being a kind person. I think that's an easy thing to follow through on. Should transgender athletes be allowed to compete in athletic events? Yes, though we do need to ensure that their hormone levels are equivalent to the gender category in which they compete. I say this because there are instances in certain sports where cisgendered men will take testosterone to improve their performance. So, it is possible for a transgender athlete to be taking more testosterone than they need in order to gain an edge in athletic competition. So, I do believe that it makes sense to have transgender athletes compete, so long as the testosterone or estrogen or whatever else is at the appropriate level, so as to not enhance their performance. I think that's a very simplistic requirement there. Should the federal government institute a mandatory buyback of assault weapons? No. I believe that's a violation of the Second Amendment. But I'm actually going to choose this, which is increase mental health and background checks instead. Should universities provide trigger warnings and safe spaces for students? I don't think so. University is a place to be challenged. Now, I do understand, say, if the person has PTSD or something else that will cause a panic attack, an anxiety attack, a PTSD episode, whatever have you. Something like that, then yes, that needs to be addressed when it comes to that. But for the everyday college student, they should not need trigger warnings or safe spaces. Should businesses be required to have women on their board of directors? Yes, but only for large international corporations that have no excuse not to have a woman on the board. Because here's the thing. I can understand smaller companies perhaps not having enough qualified women, though that is something they would need to get on top of, and something that they should do. This is by no means saying that there would be no incentive for smaller businesses to have women on their board of directors. It's simply saying that it would only be 100% required for the larger companies. Do I support the death penalty? No, too many innocent people get convicted. Should states be allowed to display the Confederate flag on government property? No, it should be put in a museum where it was originally flown. Every Confederate monument, flag, whatever, should be removed and put into a museum. This is because it is part of our history. It is a very bad part of our history. However, it is something we need to ensure people remember. For us to understand that racism is bad, we need to remember Martin Luther King Jr. and the Civil Rights Movement. We need to remember Jim Crow. We need to remember slavery. We need to remember the Civil War to understand why we should not do that stuff. Other than, of course, Martin Luther King being good, but I think you understood. Yeah, so it needs to be in a museum because, yes, it's our history. But it should not be in public where it is simply a symbol of racism and treason against the United States of America. People act like they're super patriotic whenever they fly a rebel flag. But they were literally traitors. They left the United States. So it makes no sense why, if you're a patriot, you would fly a traitor's flag. Should women be allowed to wear a face veil to civic ceremonies? Yep. We should respect all cultural traditions. Contrary to popular belief, while some women are forced to wear face veils, some do so willingly. Some believe it is part of their religion. Just like a Jewish rabbi wearing, I believe it's called a yarmulke, or a Muslim man wearing a turban. It is their religious belief that wearing a face veil is what they want to do, is what they should do. Many women voluntarily do so. Should the government support the separation of church and state by removing references to God on money, federal buildings, national monuments, and, even though this isn't part of the question, the Pledge of Allegiance? My answer is yes, but we should not waste money scratching it off all the federal buildings and national monuments right now. Just from henceforward, it's not there anymore. Should terminally ill patients be allowed to end their lives via assisted suicide? Yes, but only if once they go through the psychological examination to ensure that they are fully aware that there's no coming back. Should marital rape be classified and punished as severely as non-marital rape? Yes. Just because you're married to someone does not mean that you can take a no for a yes. Simply put, no means no, whether you're married or don't know each other. Should the military allow women to serve in combat roles? Yes. There are women who are incredibly strong. There are women who are incredibly accurate with weapons. And it makes no sense why a woman would not be in a combat role. I mean, I'm pretty sure West Virginia had a gold medalist in a rifle competition who was a woman. So, like, if you're from West Virginia and don't support it, tell it to the woman who won a gold medal for shooting a rifle bullseye as many times as she could. Like, come on. Come on, people. Like, hand-to-hand combat, for one, isn't that common. And even if it was, women are perfectly capable of fighting. Especially women who would go through boot camp. Like, come on. If you can make it through boot camp, you can do anything. So, yeah, they're allowed to serve in combat roles. Quit being a sexist. Should convicted criminals have the right to vote? Yep. If you're a citizen, you should have the right to vote. Do you support mandatory minimum prison sentences for people charged with drug possession? No. I don't have much to elaborate on that. I'm not a huge fan of mandatory minimums at all, I'll say. Should prisons ban the use of solitary confinement for juveniles? The reason this question's on here is because obviously solitary confinement can lead to mental health issues, especially in younger inmates. So, let's see. Yes, and we should create more social programs to prevent and rehabilitate criminals. A lot of people believe that punitive punishments aren't used enough in our prison system, when in reality that's all we have. We need rehabilitation instead, as it is obvious that punitive punishments just lead to them returning over and over and over again. Should nonviolent prisoners be released from jail in order to reduce overcrowding? No, but we should increase funding to offer education, skill-building services for prisoners to ensure they don't end up there again. Should police officers be required to wear body cameras? Yes, because that protects the police officer and citizens. Should the government hire private companies to run prisons? No, they should not. Every single government-run agency that has since privatized has been made worse by the privatization. Should drug traffickers receive the death penalty? No, I do not believe in the death penalty. Do you support increasing taxes for the rich in order to reduce interest rates for student loans? Yes, and increase government funding so every student receives tuition-free college education. Should the federal government pay for the tuition at four-year colleges and universities? Yes. Should the federal government fund universal preschool? Yes. And we are not including an option for private school because private schools are a company that does schooling worse. Regardless of what they say, they do it worse. Do you support Common Core national standards? No. Standardized education is bad. We need individualized education on a student-to-student basis, not a nationwide basis. Like, you went from student to student to nationwide and you just ruined everything. There's a nice way to say it. Should the government decriminalize school truancy? They should not decriminalize it, but I would prefer that it be only a fine to the parent, or once they reach high school. I don't care if they're a freshman, I don't care if they don't have their license yet. It is ridiculous to still be punishing the parents for truancy at that point. You know, at that point, it's the kid's fault. It's not the parents' fault. But once it reaches freshman in high school level, then you would punish the student through a fine, and obviously, if they do not have a job yet, money of their own, you do not want the parents to have to pay that. So instead, you just make sure they know, once they get a job, they're going to have to, you're going to, what's it called? I don't know what it's called, but taking a little bit out of their paycheck. Their first paycheck, a little bit out of it. Their second, so on. And that's how it's going to be. Yeah, for them. Do I support charter schools? No, we should focus on improving our public schools and increasing teacher wages instead. Should the government increase or decrease military spending? We should decrease military spending overall, as it is absurd, and soldiers and veterans that I have spoken to have said that, yeah, the military wastes money on random things in order to justify their massive budgets. So, we need to decrease the military budget, but increase the amount of wages that soldiers make, as we simply have that much money and can do that. Should the U.S. accept refugees from Syria? Yes, and we should accept as many as possible. Should foreign terrorism suspects be given constitutional rights? Well, they should be given a trial, which is constitutional. So, I suppose. So yes, give them a fair trial and shut down Guantanamo Bay. There have been innocent people who have had to have been released from Guantanamo Bay when we treated them awfully because we thought they were a terrorist. Should the military be allowed to use enhanced interrogation techniques, torture, such as waterboarding, to gain information from suspected terrorists? Again, suspected. All of these people are not confirmed terrorists. So why would you be torturing them? You don't even know if they're actual terrorists. Not to mention, torture has been proven ineffective at getting truthful information. So no, I do not support torturing people. Should every 18-year-old citizen be required to provide at least 1 year of military service? Other countries do require this, by the way. I don't believe that makes any sense. I don't believe that should be the case. The most tempting answer for a yes here is yes, but only for those who do not pursue further education or employment. But even then, I can see how certain people could fall through the cracks and end up being forced into the military whenever they do not need to be. So my answer to that one is a no. Besides, it really should be a voluntary service anyways, but like I said, that is the most tempting simply because I do want people to be productive with their lives even if they don't want to be. Now, that only said education or employment. I would also include things like if they were disabled, they wouldn't have to be, and stuff like that. Should the U.S. remain in the United Nations? Yes, and we need to use the UN peacekeeping forces to protect our interests more. I mean, if you go back and look, the George H.W. Bush formed a coalition through the United Nations for his Gulf War. And that ended, that war lasted a month, maybe two. But then George W. Bush, the second one, he went about it in a slightly different way, and we're still in that war. So we need to use the UN, I should be saying cooperate with the UN, for wars if we're going to get into them, to try and ensure that it is as swift as possible. We need coalitions. Before we land our first boots on the ground, we need to know that there's going to be 10 other countries' boots on the ground at the exact same moment that we touch down. Should the U.S. increase or decrease foreign aid spending? I'm going to click the answer I am satisfied with the current amount of spending. But I'm not. But this is a very difficult policy for me. I do not particularly want money going to terrorists, such as the government of Saudi Arabia. But I also know that a lot of poor countries rely on us for money, including a lot of people in countries whose governments aren't great. It's a difficult decision that I hope to have a better answer for later. Do I support the killing of Iranian Major General Soleimani? No, because it could have started another war in the Middle East. It would have started another war under any other president, and you know that. Should the United States continue to support Israel? We should support Israel and Palestine equally because both have violated various peace agreements, both have violated international law, both have done horrible things to the other one, and both deserve to be people, both deserve peace, both deserve freedom. Do you support President Obama's move when he lifted the trade and travel embargo on Cuba? I do. This is the only change in trade policy that should ever occur. Because increasing tariffs hurt the economy, free trade hurts the economy, embargoes aren't much better, but if you lift them, at least there's another country that can become an ally, so there's actually something good coming from it. Cuba is a communist country. However, embargoes hurt the citizens. So I would never place an embargo, though I would remove them. They never hurt the government, only the citizens. So, yeah, we need to remove the embargo. Should the United States remain in NATO? Yes. We should remain in NATO, even though I do believe that we need to scale back our military operations and scale back the aggressiveness of the United States military. Should the military fly drones over foreign countries to gain intelligence and kill suspected terrorists? No. Perhaps gain intelligence, but not kill them. They are only suspected, not confirmed terrorists. So, no, gather information. Should Jerusalem be recognized as the capital of Israel? No. And foreign governments should not move their embassies there. Should the United States pull all military troops out of Afghanistan? Yep. Should the United States formally declare war on ISIS? I think they're technically still a problem, but it's obviously a much less thought about thing nowadays. So, yes, but only with the full cooperation of the United Nations. Should the United States defend other NATO countries that maintain low military defense budgets relative to their GDP? Yes, refusing to defend NATO countries sets a dangerous precedent for the balance of global power. Should the United States continue NSA surveillance of its allies? No, and abolish the NSA. Should the U.S. prevent Russia from conducting airstrikes in Syria? No, we should coordinate with Russia to take out ISIS. Should the United States provide military assistance to defend Ukraine from Russia? No, we should pursue diplomatic options. Should the Chinese government be able to extradite fugitives from Hong Kong? No. Should the government cancel production of the F-35 fighter? Yes, because doesn't it cost like $600 billion, something like that? Way too much, in other words. It might be 60. I'm regretting quoting a figure. Regardless of the figure, they shouldn't do it because it's too expensive. Should the United States sell military weapons to India in order to counter Chinese and Russian influence? No, we should not sell military weapons to any foreign country. Should the United States go to war with Iran? No, the United States should encourage Iran to disarm through diplomatic channels. Should the government attempt to influence foreign elections? No. Should it be illegal to boycott Israel? No, it's a violation of free speech. Should the United States provide military aid to the terrorist state known as Saudi Arabia during its conflict with Yemen? No. And we need to cut ties with Saudi Arabia because they're a terrorist state. Should the United States conduct military strikes against North Korea in order to destroy their long-range missiles and nuclear weapons capabilities? No, we should use every diplomatic option first. Should the U.S. send ground troops to Syria to fight ISIS? Yes, but only a coordinated effort by the United Nations. Are you currently experiencing COVID-19 symptoms? No. And I was not previously diagnosed either. Should the United States raise taxes on the rich? Yes. Should the government raise the federal minimum wage? Yes, and adjust it every year according to inflation, but also make it a living wage, but according to local standards, not federal standards, meaning that you would need to include an equation, not a dollar amount in the legislation. Should the United States raise or lower the tax rate for corporations? Let's see, increase for large multinational corporations, but lower for small businesses. Should employers be required to pay men and women the same salary for the same job, considering that there is still a gender pay gap even once you account for the different careers that men and women have? Yes. And businesses should publish what their salary ranges are. Do I support a basic income program? Okay, so I'm sure you know at this point, basic income is a paycheck every month or whatever from the government as a basic income, whatever. I do not support that version of a universal basic income. I do believe in a people's dividend or something to that extent. Currently, my Stay-at-Home Parents Appreciation Act, in which abandoned buildings are converted into monetized affordable housing or monetized businesses in order to then invest in a dividend for stay-at-home parents, which could be considered a universal basic income for stay-at-home parents. So in a way, yes, but under its normal configuration, no. Should welfare recipients be tested for drugs? Yes, but they should be provided with treatment. Do I believe that labor unions help or hurt the economy? I believe that they are helpful. Should there be fewer or more restrictions on current welfare benefits? I actually do not want to make many changes to the current restrictions. I'm sure there are a few that I could get rid of, as there are almost certainly restrictions put in there that make no sense. Should the government make cuts to public spending in order to reduce the national debt? No, but there are certain things that we can cut, such as military spending, and taxes that will be increased, such as those on the rich and such. Should businesses be required to provide paid family leave for full-time employees during the birth of a child or sick family member? Let's see here. So, yes, but under my proposal, it would be that the government would cover a portion of that, with smaller businesses providing less of a portion of the paid leave than larger businesses have to provide, ranging from the smallest business providing probably 10% or less of the paid leave to the large business having to provide up to 80%. Should the government increase the tax rate on profits earned from the sale of stocks, bonds, and real estate? Yeah. Let's see. Yes, and all income should be taxed at the same rate. Should the current estate tax rate be decreased? No, considering that you have to have $5 million before it even matters to you. So, no, and increase it at a progressive rate, which is how the current income tax system works, if you're not aware. Should the government require businesses to pay salaried employees making $46,000 a year time and a half for overtime hours? Let's see. Yes, and all employees should be paid time and a half for overtime hours regardless of their pay scale. Should the government use economic stimulus to aid the country during times of recession? Yes, but in the form... Let's see. Yes, but in the form of increased spending on infrastructure. Should the United States continue to participate in NAFTA, or I suppose now we're not in it, so USMCA, we should have stayed in NAFTA, because changing trade policy, no matter which way you're going, whether you're lowering tariffs or adding tariffs, it's hurting the economy. Should pension plans for federal, state, and government workers be transitioned to privately managed accounts? No. Privately managed accounts will jeopardize financial security. Should United States citizens be allowed to save or invest their money in offshore bank accounts? Yes, as long as their offshore income is reported. The reason I say yes is if they have a secondary home in another country or something like that. Should the government break up Amazon, Facebook, and Google? While I do not understand the feasibility of doing that, I do believe all three are monopolies and therefore do need to be broken up. I do not know how, if Google were to be broken into multiple companies, whoever got the Google trademarks in that agreement would likely be still the largest company. So I do think that there needs to be certain exceptions to where the Google trademark or whatever is simply removed and cannot be used by any of the succeeding companies. If we were to truly have a better breakup of these three companies. Should the government prevent mega mergers of corporations that could potentially control a large percentage of market share within an industry? Yes, if the merged corporation would have more than 25% of the market share. Should the president offer tax breaks to individual companies to keep jobs in the United States? No. No, and we should make a corporate flight tax that taxes them for moving assets out of the country. Should the United States increase taxes on imported products from China? No. Increasing or decreasing tariffs both hurt the economy. Should pension payments be increased for retired government workers? Yes, and adjust them yearly for the cost of living. Should the government subsidize farmers? Let's see here. Yes, but only small local farms instead of large corporations. Did I support TPP? No, because it's a trade policy change. Should the government add or increase tariffs on products imported into the country? No. Changing trade policy will hurt the economy. Would you favor an increased sales tax in order to reduce property taxes? No, I do not. Property taxes are the best way that states and local governments receive revenue. Not to mention, we don't even have a federal sales tax, which even if we did a very, very small federal sales tax, it would bring in a lot of money that could easily handle all of the deficits. Should an in-state sales tax apply to online purchases of in-state buyers from out-of-state sellers? No, customers should pay the sales tax from the seller's state because it's a lot easier to do that way. Should the government acquire equity stakes in companies that it bails out during a recession? It shouldn't really bail out any company, but if they do, then yeah, the government absolutely should receive stock in the company. Should the government classify Bitcoin as a legal currency? No, it has no intrinsic value. Should the IRS create a free electronic tax filing system? Absolutely. They should have done that as soon as the internet was invented. Should the Federal Reserve Bank be audited by Congress? Yes, we deserve to know who the bank gives money to. While Congress is not the best people to audit anything, it is a lot better for the Federal Reserve Bank to be audited at least a little bit. Do I support the use of nuclear energy? No, we should invest in cleaner alternatives such as wind, hydroelectric, I don't know that one, and geothermal. Should the government require children to be vaccinated for preventable diseases? Yes. Now, for all you anti-vaxxers, let me tell you, the original study that said that vaccines caused autism was deeply flawed. The doctor that got that put in a journal has been discredited and has had his medical licenses revoked. The journal is now a laughingstock for having published it. Not to mention the fact that the substance supposedly causing autism has actually been removed from every single vaccine, even though there was no actual connection. Meaning that even if there were a connection, there would be no reason to still be worried about it since it is in no vaccines anymore. Should producers be required to label genetically engineered foods? No, we have been selectively breeding plants for thousands, if not millions of years. Should the government fund space travel? I am not a big fan of NASA. However, if you look at it, NASA has discovered many great things. So providing NASA with appropriate funding could help the economy overall. So, yes, I will fund space travel. That is actually very hard for me to say. Should the Electoral College be abolished? No. I believe that they should be awarded proportionally at the state level, however. Should a photo ID be required to vote? No, and we should automatically register every citizen once they turn 18, should foreigners currently residing in the United States have the right to vote. Let's see. No, only legal citizens should be allowed to vote. I understand that some people disagree with that, but citizens should be the only ones to vote, in my opinion. Should political candidates be required to release their recent tax returns to the public? Yes. Should there be a limit to the amount of money a candidate can receive from a donor? Yes. Politicians should not be bought by wealthy donors. Should the minimum voting age be lowered? No. Should corporations, unions, and nonprofit organizations be allowed to donate to political parties? I believe that unions and nonprofits should be able to, though not corporations. So, no, but allow from unions and nonprofits. Should a politician who has been formally convicted of a crime be allowed to run for office? Yes, as long as the crime was not a felony, violent, financial, or sexual crime. Should foreign lobbyists be allowed to raise money for American elections? No. Should there be a 5-year ban on White House and congressional officials from becoming lobbyists after they leave the government? Yes, and make it a lifetime ban. Do I support Obamacare? Yes, but a mandatory single-payer system would be even better. Should the, which I actually want to go further in depth into this one, I should say. So, a mandatory single-payer system on the federal level, just all the opposition to it is lies, and if you actually look into it, it is very possible, very affordable, etc., etc. But what I want to focus on is state-level single-payer. Now, 11 states, which are California, Colorado, Oregon, Hawaii, Illinois, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, Minnesota, Vermont, Montana, and New York, have attempted single-state, single-payer systems. And the single-state part of that is why I believe that they have failed. I believe that if a state wants to create a single-payer system, we need to create multi-state single-payer systems to get the ball moving on this. So that is my proposal for a multi-state single payer. Should the federal government increase funding of healthcare for low-income individuals, aka Medicaid? Yes, but I prefer switching to a single-payer healthcare system. Do I support a single-payer healthcare system? Yes, this system guarantees healthcare for everyone. Should people be required to work in order to receive Medicaid? No, the vast majority who receive it are disabled. Should the government regulate the price of life-saving drugs? Yes, and the government should regulate the price of all prescription drugs. Should there be more or less privatization of veterans' healthcare? There should be less, because as people seem to think that because veterans' healthcare is public that it's bad, when in reality, everything that veterans don't like about their healthcare is all the problems that they have with the privatized part of their healthcare. So there needs to be far less. Preferably none. Let's see. Yeah, okay. Should cities open drug safe havens where people who are addicted to illegal drugs can use them under the supervision of medical professionals? No, but legalizing a lot of drugs will accomplish the same basic helpfulness, though the more dangerous ones that this is more targeted towards should still be illegal. Should the federal government be allowed to negotiate drug prices for Medicare? Yes. Should the government increase funding for mental health research and treatment? Yes, but only for personalized care, not pharmaceutical companies. Should health insurers be allowed to deny coverage to individuals who have a pre-existing condition? No. Do I support the legalization of marijuana? Yes, legalize, tax, and regulate marijuana. When should your state end the stay-at-home order and reopen its economy? Oh boy. We do not know yet. Okay? So, the best option here is until a vaccine is approved by the FDA. I would also accept if it were that the coronavirus were like significantly more under control. It is not significantly more under control. It's slightly under control, but it's getting back out of control now that stay-at-home orders are being lifted. So, yeah. Now, on here, it also has these local issues, which is basically just who you're going to vote for, which you can already see who I voted for in another video. Show my results to this political quiz, please.
More than a business.
Hey, blah, 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 blah. I was making that noise so I don't need an ad playing in the background. I 91% agree with the Green Party, 90% agree with the Socialist Party. A pop-up just happened, hold up. Move you. No thanks. 86% agree with the Peace and Freedom Party, 85% transhumanist, 83% Democratic, 61% Libertarian, 31% Republican, and 31% Constitution Party. So, that's the political quiz that I took. It is isidewith.com that I took the quiz on. Well, I'm Colby Lopez, and I approve this message. Please like this video, comment below, and subscribe to my channel. Bye!